Mila Ross learned early that women like her were never chosen, only tolerated, whispered about, made invisible by men who looked through her like glass. She scrubbed floors in a crime lord's mansion, kept her head down, and accepted the world's verdict. But the night she whispered her darkest truth aloud, women like me don't get to be wives, only secrets. She didn't know Dominic Vale was standing in the shadows, listening. And she didn't know that the most dangerous man in the city was about to make her the most visible woman in his world. If you want to see how a woman once told she was worthless becomes the one thing a ruthless king can't live without, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Mila's story travels. The mansion didn't sleep. Even at 3 in the morning, when the city outside had gone quiet and the stars hung heavy over the estate's iron gates, the house hummed with life. Footsteps echoed down marble hallways. Voices murmured behind closed doors. Somewhere in the West Wing, a phone rang twice and went silent. This was Dominic Vale's world, a place where power never rested, where money moved like blood through veins, and where danger wore expensive suits and smiled with white teeth. Mila Ross moved through it like a ghost. She had worked in the Vale mansion for 2 years, hired through an agency that didn't ask questions and paid in cash. Her job was simple: clean what needed cleaning, stay out of sight, and never, ever speak unless spoken to. She was good at it, better than good. Mila had spent her entire life learning how to be invisible. At 28, she carried extra weight on her frame, soft curves that the world had taught her to hate, a body that didn't fit the magazine covers or the women who draped themselves over men like Dominic Vale. She kept her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, wore shapeless gray uniforms that hid her shape, and avoided mirrors whenever possible. When she walked through the mansion's glittering halls past the crystal chandeliers and the art worth more than she'd make in a lifetime, she kept her eyes down. The men who worked for Dominic, the enforcers, the advisors, the dealers who came and went like shadows, they looked through her. Sometimes they looked at her long enough to laugh. Jesus, they'll hire anyone these days. Vale must be getting soft, keeping charity cases on the payroll. You think she's ever even been kissed? I'd need 3 drinks and a blindfold. The comments followed her like smoke. They stuck to her skin even after she scrubbed it raw in the shower. But Mila had learned long ago not to react. Reaction required visibility, and visibility meant pain. So she cleaned, and she stayed quiet, and she told herself it didn't matter. Except sometimes, late at night when the mansion finally fell silent and she was alone in the industrial laundry room folding sheets that cost more than her monthly rent, the weight of it pressed down on her chest until she couldn't breathe. Tonight was one of those nights. Mila stood at the folding table, her hands moving automatically through the rhythm of corners and creases. The machines had gone quiet an hour ago. The other staff, the cooks, the drivers, the security teams, had retired to their quarters or gone home. She should have been done too, should have been in her small room on the 3rd floor, but she'd volunteered for the late shift. Again. Better to be tired than alone with her thoughts. She folded a white pillowcase, set it on the growing stack, and reached for another. Her fingers trembled slightly. She'd barely eaten today, half a sandwich at lunch, stolen between scrubbing bathrooms on the 2nd floor. One of the guards had made a comment about her needing to lay off the carbs, and her appetite had died in her throat. Women like me don't get to be wives. Only secrets. The thought rose unbidden, the way it always did when she was too tired to fight it. It was a truth she'd carried since high school, since the first boy she'd liked had taken one look at her body and laughed. Since her own mother had sighed and said, "Honey, maybe focus on your education. Marriage isn't for everyone." Mila's hands stilled on the fabric. "Women like me," she whispered to the empty room, her voice cracking. "We don't get chosen. We get used. We get hidden. We're the ones they sleep with in the dark and pretend don't exist in the morning." The words hung in the air, pathetic and small. She waited for the usual shame to follow, the voice in her head that would tell her to stop feeling sorry for herself, to be grateful she even had a job. But instead, a different voice cut through the silence, one that didn't come from inside her head at all. "Is that what you really believe?" Mila's heart stopped. She spun around, the pillowcase falling from her hands, and found herself staring at Dominic Vale. He stood in the doorway of the laundry room, one hand braced against the frame, his tall frame backlit by the hallway lights. He was still dressed from whatever business had kept him awake. Black shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled to his elbows, dark slacks that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. His face was all sharp angles and shadow, strong jaw, high cheekbones, eyes so dark they looked black in the dim light. Mila had seen him before, of course. You couldn't work in Dominic Vale's house and not see him. But she'd never been alone with him. Never been this close. Never had those eyes fixed on her with the kind of focus that made her feel like a specimen under glass. Her voice came out as a squeak. She cleared her throat, dropping her gaze to the floor. Mr. Vale, I'm sorry. I didn't know anyone was... I'll just answer the question. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through her panic like a blade. Mila's throat closed. She couldn't look at him. Couldn't think. This was Dominic Vale, the man who controlled half the crime in the city, who made people disappear with a phone call, who wore violence like other men wore cologne. And she just let him hear her crying about being unfuckable. I asked you, Dominic said, his voice dropping lower, if that's what you really believe, that women like you are only good enough to hide. Mila's hands clenched at her sides. Shame burned through her chest, hot and acidic. It doesn't matter what I believe, sir. I'm sorry for... I shouldn't have been. I'll finish up here and... Look at me. It wasn't a request. Slowly, painfully, Mila forced her eyes up. She made it as far as his chest before her courage failed. Even that was too much. She could see the way his shirt stretched across broad shoulders, the outline of muscle beneath expensive fabric, the casual power in the way he stood. Higher, Dominic said quietly. Mila's breath shook. She dragged her gaze up to his face and immediately regretted it. His expression was unreadable, carved from stone, but his eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Tell me who taught you that, he said. That you're not worth choosing. Everyone, Mila whispered. The word slipped out before she could stop it. Everyone teaches you that, when you look like me. Something flickered across Dominic's face, there and gone too fast to name. He stepped into the room, and Mila's instinct was to back away, but the folding table pressed against her spine. She was trapped, cornered by the most dangerous man she'd ever met, in a room that suddenly felt far too small. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, cedar and smoke. You think you're invisible, Dominic said. It wasn't a question. You think the men in this house don't see you? Mila's laugh came out bitter and broken. I know they don't, Mr. Vale. Trust me, I've heard what they say. What do they say? The question was too casual, too soft. It sent a warning bell ringing in the back of Mila's mind, but she was too far gone to stop now. Too tired, too raw, too fucking done with pretending it didn't hurt. They say I'm lucky to have this job, she said flatly, because no one would ever want to look at me otherwise. They say you must be running a charity, keeping someone like me on staff. They say, her voice cracked. They say a lot of things, sir. And they're right. I know what I am. I know I'm not the kind of woman men like you notice. Silence fell like a hammer. Dominic didn't move, didn't speak. He just looked at her with those impossible dark eyes, and Mila wanted to sink through the floor and disappear forever. Then he turned and walked out. The door swung shut behind him with a soft click, and Mila crumpled against the table, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she forced them back. She'd already humiliated herself enough for one night. She didn't let herself cry until she was back in her room, door locked, face buried in a pillow that muffled the sound. And she definitely didn't let herself wonder why Dominic Vale had looked at her like he was memorizing every word she said. The next morning, Mila woke to the sound of shouting. She jolted upright in bed, heart pounding, and checked her phone. 6:30. She'd overslept. She was supposed to be downstairs by 6 to help prep the breakfast service. Fuck. She threw on her uniform, pulled her hair back, and hurried downstairs, taking the service stairs 2 at a time. The shouting grew louder as she approached the main kitchen, accompanied by the crash of something heavy hitting the floor. Mila froze at the kitchen door. Marcus Chen, one of Dominic's senior enforcers, was backed against the industrial refrigerator, his face white as chalk. Dominic stood in front of him, one hand wrapped around Marcus's throat, holding him pinned 3 inches off the ground. "Say it again," Dominic said quietly. "I want to make sure I heard you correctly." Marcus made a choking sound. His hand scrabbled uselessly at Dominic's wrist. "Boss, I was just—" "You were just explaining to the new hire that the help needs to stay in their lane," Dominic said. His voice was perfectly calm, almost conversational. "That women like Mila Ross should be grateful anyone lets them through the front door. That's what you said, isn't it?" Horror washed through Mila in a cold wave. Oh God. This was about last night. This was about what she'd said. "It was a joke," Marcus gasped. "Just fucking around. Didn't mean—" Dominic's hand tightened. Marcus's eyes bulged. "Here's what's going to happen," Dominic said. "You're going to apologize, not to me. To her." He jerked his head toward the doorway, toward Mila. Every head in the kitchen turned. Mila stood frozen, her face burning, as a dozen pairs of eyes landed on her. The kitchen staff, 3 security guards, 2 of Dominic's advisors who'd been having coffee at the breakfast bar, all of them staring at the fat housemaid who'd somehow earned the boss's personal intervention. "I'm sorry," Marcus choked out, his gaze finding Mila's. I'm sorry, miss. I was out of line." Dominic held him there for another 5 seconds, then opened his hand. Marcus dropped to the floor, coughing and clutching his throat. He scrambled backward, putting distance between himself and his boss. "Anyone else have comments about my staff?" Dominic asked the room. His tone was light, almost friendly. "Observations about who belongs here and who doesn't? Jokes you'd like to share?" Silence. Dominic's gaze swept the kitchen, cold and absolute, and Mila watched grown men, killers, dealers, enforcers who'd built careers on violence, look away. "Good," Dominic said. He straightened his cuffs, his expression returning to its usual mask of controlled indifference. "Miss Ross, you're with me. The rest of you, get back to work." Mila's legs moved before her brain caught up. She crossed the kitchen on autopilot, feeling every eye track her movement, and followed Dominic out into the hallway. He walked without looking back, clearly expecting her to keep up. She did, her mind spinning. He led her to a small sitting room off the main hall, a space she'd cleaned 100 times but never occupied. When they were inside, he closed the door and turned to face her. "You're moving to the 2nd floor," he said flatly. "East wing. There's a suite being prepared for you now." Mila blinked. What?" "You'll continue your duties, but you're no longer cleaning the common areas. You'll handle my private quarters exclusively." Dominic's gaze was steady, impersonal. "Your salary is tripled, effective immediately. You'll take meals with the household staff in the formal dining room, not the kitchen." "Mr. Vale, I don't understand. You will not be disrespected in my house," Dominic said. The words were carved from ice. "Not by my men, not by anyone. Is that clear?" Mila's mouth opened, closed. Her thoughts were a tangle of confusion and panic, and something else, something that felt dangerously close to hope. "Why?" she whispered. Dominic looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black card, the kind of key card that opened doors in the restricted sections of the mansion. He held it out. "Because," he said quietly, "you were wrong about something last night." Mila took the card with shaking fingers. "Wrong about what?" Dominic's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, something dark and certain and absolutely terrifying in its intensity. "You think no one sees you," he said. "You're wrong. I see you, Mila Ross, and I'm done watching you disappear." He turned and walked out, leaving Mila standing alone in the sitting room, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The suite on the 2nd floor was bigger than the apartment Mila had grown up in. She stood in the doorway, staring at the space that was apparently hers now, and tried to process what the hell was happening. A king-size bed with white linens, a sitting area with a leather couch and a flat-screen TV, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the estate gardens, an ensuite bathroom with a clawfoot tub and heated floors. This wasn't a staff room. This was a guest suite. The kind of room where Dominic Vale housed visiting dignitaries or business associates he needed to impress. "Mr. Vale said to bring these up for you, miss." Mila turned to find Maria, one of the senior housekeepers, standing behind her with an armful of fresh towels and linens. The older woman's expression was carefully neutral, but Mila caught the flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "Thank you," Mila managed. "You can just... On the bed is fine." Maria nodded and moved past her into the room. She set the linens down with practiced efficiency, then hesitated. "Miss Ross, if you need anything at all, you can call down to the main desk. Mr. Vale left instructions that you're to be accommodated." "Accommodated," Mila repeated numbly. Maria's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "His words, not mine. But between you and me?" She lowered her voice, stepping closer. "I've worked for Mr. Vale for 6 years. I've never seen him lose his temper over staff issues. Whatever happened this morning, you've got his attention now. Be careful with that." She left before Mila could ask what that meant. Mila spent the rest of the day in a fog. She tried to work, went to Dominic's private quarters on the 3rd floor to clean, the way she'd been told, but her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped a priceless vase. The rooms were immaculate, barely used, and she got the distinct feeling she was being kept busy rather than actually needed. At lunch, she forced herself to go to the formal dining room. The household staff, drivers, personal assistants, security coordinators, looked up when she entered. No one said anything, but she felt their stares like brands on her skin. She took a seat at the far end of the table and picked at a salad she couldn't taste. Across the table, Marcus Chen sat with his head down, a livid bruise blooming across his throat. No one spoke to him either. That evening, Mila was summoned to Dominic's office. She'd never been inside before. The room was all dark wood and leather, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and a massive desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of mahogany. Dominic sat behind it, reviewing something on his laptop, his face illuminated by the screen's blue glow. He looked up when she entered. "Sit," he said, gesturing to one of the chairs across from him. Mila sat. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Dominic closed the laptop and leaned back, studying her. "How was your first day in the new position?" "Fine," Mila said automatically. Then, because she couldn't help herself, "Mr. Vale, I need to understand what's happening. I'm not complaining, but I don't understand why you're doing this. I'm just a maid. I'm nobody." "You're not nobody." "I am," Mila insisted, her voice cracked. "I'm exactly what those men said I am. I'm the help. I clean toilets and fold laundry and stay out of the way. That's all I'm supposed to be. That's all I've ever been. So why—" She stopped, her throat closing. "Why are you looking at me?" Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, moving around the desk with that predatory grace she was starting to recognize. He stopped in front of her chair, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Do you know what I do, Mila?" he asked quietly. She swallowed. "You run an empire." "I read people," Dominic corrected. "I look at a man across a negotiating table and I know if he's lying. I watch someone's hands and I know if they're about to pull a gun. I've built everything I have on my ability to see what others miss." His gaze held hers, unblinking. "And when I look at you, I see a woman who's been told her entire life that she doesn't matter, that she's not worth noticing, that she should be grateful for scraps." Mila's breath hitched. "I also see," Dominic continued, his voice dropping lower, "a woman who's never had anyone fight for her, who's never had anyone choose her, who thinks she's invisible because that's safer than hoping someone might actually see her." Tears burned behind Mila's eyes. She blinked them back furiously. "You heard me last night," she whispered, "in the laundry room. You weren't supposed to—" "I heard you," Dominic agreed, "and I'm telling you now, you were wrong. You're not invisible to me, Mila Ross. You never were." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning she didn't dare interpret. Mila forced herself to breathe. "What do you want from me?" It was the question she should have asked in the beginning, the one that mattered. Men like Dominic Vale didn't do things out of kindness. They didn't elevate housemaids to private suites and triple their salary without expecting something in return. But Dominic just smiled, a small, dangerous curve of his mouth that made her stomach flip. "I want you to stop hiding," he said simply. I want you to have dinner with me tomorrow night, and I want you to start believing that you're exactly where you're supposed to be." He stepped back, giving her space, his expression returning to its usual mask. "You're dismissed for the evening. Get some rest." Mila stood on shaking legs and made it halfway to the door before his voice stopped her. "Mila?" She turned. Dominic was watching her with that same intense focus, the look that made her feel like the only person in the world. "The men who told you that you weren't enough," he said quietly, "they were wrong, and I'm going to make sure you never believe them again." Over the next 3 days, Mila's world shifted on its axis. She moved through the mansion in a daze, hyper-aware of every glance, every whisper, every moment of sudden silence when she entered a room. The other staff didn't know what to make of her transformation. Some were kind. Maria brought her tea in the mornings, and the head chef started preparing plates specifically to her taste. Others kept their distance, watching her with wary eyes, clearly uncertain whether she was someone to befriend or fear. The men who worked for Dominic, the ones who'd mocked her just days ago, now avoided her entirely. They stepped aside when she walked down hallways. They stopped talking when she passed. Marcus Chen had disappeared entirely, transferred to a different operation, according to rumor, though no one seemed to know where. And Dominic was everywhere. He appeared at breakfast, sitting across from her at the formal dining table while she tried not to choke on her coffee. He found her in the library one afternoon, reading a book she'd pulled from his shelves, and sat down beside her to ask what she thought of it. He summoned her to his office for no reason Mila could discern, just to ask about her day, to make sure she had everything she needed. Every interaction was professional, polite, carefully controlled, and absolutely terrifying in its intensity. Because Dominic looked at her the way no man ever had, like she was something rare and valuable, something worth protecting. And Mila didn't know what to do with that. Didn't know how to reconcile the brutal crime lord who'd choked a man unconscious in his own kitchen with the man who remembered that she took her coffee with cream and no sugar. The dinner came on Friday night. Mila stood in front of the mirror in her suite, staring at her reflection with a sick feeling in her stomach. She'd agonized for hours over what to wear, finally settling on a simple black dress she'd bought years ago for a funeral and never worn again. It was too tight across her hips, too short in the sleeves, and made her feel exposed in ways that had nothing to do with skin. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman playing dress-up, pretending to belong in a world that had never wanted her. The knock on her door came at exactly 7. Mila opened it to find Dominic in a charcoal suit, no tie, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread. His gaze traveled over her, slow, assessing, and she fought the urge to cover herself with her hands. "You look beautiful," he said. The words hit her like a slap. Mila's throat closed. "You don't have to." "I don't lie," Dominic interrupted. He offered his arm. "Shall we?" Dinner was set in the mansion's private dining room, a space Mila had only ever seen empty. Tonight it glowed with candlelight, the long table set for 2 at one end, crystal glasses, silver cutlery, a bottle of wine that probably cost more than her car. Dominic pulled out her chair, waited for her to sit, then took his own seat across from her. "I took the liberty of having the chef prepare something I thought you'd enjoy," he said as the first course was brought out, a delicate butternut squash soup with sage oil. "But if you'd prefer something else—" "This is perfect," Mila said quickly. Her hands trembled as she picked up her spoon. "Thank you." They ate in silence for a few minutes. Mila tried to focus on the food, which was incredible, but she could feel Dominic's gaze on her like a physical touch. "You're afraid of me," he said finally. It wasn't a question, but Mila answered anyway. "Should I be?" "That depends." Dominic set down his spoon, his expression thoughtful. "Are you afraid of what I might do to you? Or are you afraid of what it means that I want to?" Mila's breath caught. She set her own spoon down, her appetite gone. "I don't understand what you want from me, Mr. Vale. I'm not the kind of woman men like you date. I'm not the kind of woman anyone dates. So whatever this is—" "My name is Dominic," he said quietly, "and you're going to stop telling me what kind of woman you are, because you clearly have no fucking idea." The profanity startled her. So did the edge in his voice, the first crack in his carefully controlled exterior. "I know exactly what kind of woman I am," Mila shot back, surprising herself with the heat in her words. I've spent 28 years learning. I'm the woman men sleep with when they're drunk and regret in the morning. I'm the woman they hide from their friends. I'm the punchline, Dominic. I've always been the punchline. Dominic's jaw tightened. He pushed back from the table and stood, moving around to her side with quick, controlled movements. He stopped beside her chair, and when he spoke, his voice was low and dangerous. Stand up. Mila's heart hammered. What? Stand up, Dominic repeated. Look at me. She did slowly, her legs unsteady. Dominic stepped closer, closing the distance between them until she could feel the heat radiating off his body. He was so much taller than her, broad-shouldered and solid, and she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You want to know what I see when I look at you? He said quietly. I see a woman who's stronger than she knows, who's survived a world that tried to break her and came out whole. I see intelligence in your eyes, kindness in the way you treat people who don't deserve it, and a spine made of steel hiding under all that fear. Mila's breath came in short, sharp gasps. You barely know me. I know enough. Dominic reached up, his fingers brushing her cheek with surprising gentleness. I know you're terrified right now. I know you think this is some kind of game, that I'm going to hurt you or humiliate you or prove all those bastards right. But I'm not them, Mila, and I'm not going away. Why? The word broke on a sob. Why me? Dominic's thumb traced the curve of her jaw, and his eyes, God, his eyes were so dark, so intense, held hers without wavering. Because, he said softly, you're the first real thing I've seen in 10 years. Because when you talk, you don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Because you look at me like I'm a man, not a monster. And because, his voice dropped even lower, because the second I heard you say you weren't worth choosing, I knew I was going to prove you wrong. Mila's knees buckled. Dominic caught her, his arm wrapping around her waist, holding her steady. She could feel the strength in him, the barely leashed power, and it should have scared her. But instead, for the first time in her life, she felt safe. I don't know how to do this, she whispered against his chest. Dominic's hand came up to cradle the back of her head, his fingers threading through her hair. Then let me show you. Show. He pulled back just enough to look at her, and the question in his eyes was clear. Mila answered by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, hesitant, her inexperience obvious in the way she trembled against him. But Dominic responded with a gentleness that shattered something inside her. His mouth moved against hers slowly, patiently, like they had all the time in the world, like she was something precious. When they finally broke apart, Mila was crying. Hey, Dominic murmured, wiping her tears with his thumbs. Talk to me. I'm scared, Mila admitted. I'm so fucking scared, Dominic, because this feels real, and I don't know what to do when things feel real. It is real, Dominic said firmly. He pressed his forehead to hers, his hands framing her face. And I'm going to prove it to you, every single day, until you believe it. Mila closed her eyes, letting herself lean into his touch. For the first time in her life, she let herself hope. She didn't know that across the city, in a high-rise office overlooking the harbor, Dominic's enemies were already watching. She didn't know that by choosing to be seen, she'd made herself a target. And she definitely didn't know that the man holding her so gently was about to burn the world down to keep her safe. But she would, soon. The photograph arrived 3 days later, slipped under Dominic's office door in a plain manila envelope. He found it at dawn, when the mansion was still quiet and the city outside had just begun to stir. Dominic had been awake for hours already. Sleep had become a luxury he could rarely afford, his mind too full of expansion plans and territory disputes and the delicate balance of power that kept his empire from collapsing. But lately, his thoughts had been occupied by something else entirely. Someone else. He picked up the envelope, recognizing immediately that it didn't belong. No markings. No return address. Just the weight of something glossy inside. Dominic's instincts, honed by years of survival in a world where trust was currency and betrayal was cheaper than bullets, screamed warning. He opened it anyway. The photograph showed Mila leaving the mansion's side entrance, her arms full of cleaning supplies, her head down as she walked toward the service building. It had been taken 2 weeks ago, before everything changed. Before Dominic had moved her upstairs, Before that first dinner, before he'd kissed her and felt something in his chest crack open after years of being locked down tight. Someone had been watching his house. Watching her. There was no note, no message, but Dominic didn't need one. He'd been in this business long enough to read the subtext. This was a warning shot, a reminder that nothing in his world was private, that everyone he cared about was vulnerable, that Mila, simply by existing in his orbit, had painted a target on her back. He should have expected it, should have planned for it. The second he'd touched her, the second he'd let himself want something beyond power and control, he'd made her a liability. But knowing that didn't stop the cold fury that flooded through him as he stared at the image. Dominic pulled out his phone and made a call. It was answered on the first ring. "Get everyone to the East Conference Room," he said quietly. 20 minutes. And find out who the fuck has been surveilling my property without authorization." He hung up without waiting for a response. Mila woke to sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her suite, the kind of gentle morning that felt impossible in the life she'd lived before. For a moment she lay still, letting herself pretend this was normal, that she belonged in this bed, in this room, in this version of herself that Dominic seemed so certain existed. Then reality crept in, the way it always did. She touched her lips, remembering the kiss from 3 nights ago, the way Dominic had held her like she was something fragile and fierce all at once, the way he'd looked at her afterward, his dark eyes full of promises she was terrified to believe. They'd had dinner together every night since then, quiet meals where Dominic asked her about her life before the mansion, about the things she loved, the dreams she'd abandoned. He listened like every word mattered, like her thoughts were worth the air it took to speak them. And slowly, carefully, Mila had started to let herself hope that maybe she was allowed to want this. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Maria. "Mr. Vale would like to see you in his office when you're ready. No rush." Mila's stomach flipped. She typed back a quick acknowledgement and headed for the shower, trying to ignore the nervous energy humming under her skin. Every summons from Dominic felt loaded with possibility, weighted with the question of what came next. When she arrived at his office 40 minutes later, freshly dressed in dark jeans and a soft gray sweater that Maria had mysteriously left in her closet, she found the door slightly ajar. She knocked anyway. "Come in." Dominic's voice was flat, controlled in a way that made Mila pause. She pushed the door open and stepped inside, then stopped short. The room was full of men. 6 of them, all standing around Dominic's desk with the kind of rigid attention that spoke of military training, or worse. She recognized a few faces. Vincent Torres, Dominic's head of security, James Park, who handled the financial operations. Others whose names she didn't know, but whose reputations preceded them. They all turned to look at her when she entered. Dominic stood behind his desk, his expression unreadable. "Gentlemen, give us the room." The men filed out without a word, though Mila caught the way Vincent's gaze lingered on her, assessing, calculating. When the door closed behind them, the silence felt heavy enough to crush. "Sit down," Dominic said. Mila sat, her hands clenched in her lap. "What's wrong?" Dominic reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a photograph. He slid it across the polished wood toward her. Mila picked it up, her breath catching when she saw herself. "I don't understand. When was this?" 2 weeks ago. "Someone's been watching the house," and Dominic's voice was cold, precise. "Which means someone knows about you. About us." The word "us" sent a thrill through her, even as fear coiled in her gut. Why would anyone care about me? "Because you matter to me," Dominic said bluntly, "and in my world, that makes you leverage." Mila set the photograph down with shaking hands. She'd known this was dangerous, had known from the second Dominic looked at her like she was more than invisible that there would be consequences. But knowing it in theory and facing it in practice were 2 very different things. "What do we do?" she asked quietly. Dominic's expression softened slightly. He moved around the desk and crouched in front of her chair, his hands settling on her knees. "You don't do anything. This is my world, Mila. My mess. I'll handle it." "By doing what? Hiding me again?" The words came out sharper than she intended. "Making me disappear so I'm not a problem anymore?" "By keeping you safe," Dominic countered. His grip tightened. by making sure no one can touch you. And how long does that last? Mila heard her voice rising, felt the panic she'd been suppressing for days finally breaking through. How long before someone decides I'm too much of a risk? Before you decide it's easier to just stop? Dominic's voice cut through her spiral like a blade. He stood, pulling her up with him, his hands framing her face. Look at me. Look at me, Mila. She did, and the intensity in his eyes stole her breath. I am not letting you go, Dominic said, each word deliberate. I am not hiding you. I am not pretending you don't exist. What I am doing is making it very clear to every person in this city that you are under my protection, that touching you means war. Do you understand? Mila's throat closed. That's going to make things worse. You know it will. The more visible I am, the more protected you are, Dominic finished, because no one will risk coming after you if they know I'll burn their entire operation to the ground in response. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. I've spent 10 years building an empire on fear and control. Let me use it for something that matters. I'm not worth starting a war over, Mila whispered. Dominic's jaw tightened. That's where you're wrong. He kissed her then, hard and claiming, and Mila felt the last of her resistance crumble. When he pulled back, his eyes were molten. Get dressed, he said. Something nice. We're going out tonight. Out? Dominic, if someone's watching, then they're going to see exactly what I want them to see. Dominic smiled, and it was the kind of smile that had probably made grown men wet themselves. Trust me. The restaurant was called Aurelio's, an institution in the city's downtown core where politicians brokered deals and crime lords negotiated territory over $30 stakes. Mila had driven past it 100 times in her old life, never imagining she'd set foot inside. Now she sat across from Dominic in a private booth overlooking the city lights, wearing a dress that Maria had somehow procured in the span of 3 hours, deep emerald silk that hugged her curves and made her feel both exposed and powerful. Dominic had looked at her when she came downstairs, really looked, and the heat in his gaze had almost sent her running back to her room. But she'd let him lead her to the car, let Vincent and 2 other guards bracket them on the drive downtown, let Dominic's hands settle possessively at the small of her back as they walked through Aurelio's front entrance. And she'd felt every eye in the restaurant turn to watch. You're doing this on purpose, Mila murmured as they were seated. Making a spectacle. I'm taking a beautiful woman to dinner, Dominic replied smoothly. If people want to stare, let them. Dominic, do you know how many times I've eaten here? He interrupted, his gaze steady. Hundreds, maybe thousands, and every single time I've sat alone or with men discussing business. I've never brought a woman to this restaurant, Mila. Not once. Her breath caught. Why not? Because I've never had a reason to. Dominic reached across the table, his fingers threading through hers. Until now. The server arrived before Mila could respond, rattling off specials with practiced efficiency. Dominic ordered for both of them without looking at the menu, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand the entire time. When they were alone again, Mila forced herself to breathe. You're trying to send a message, she said. I'm making a statement, Dominic corrected. There's a difference. What statement? His eyes locked on hers. That you're mine, and anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. The possessiveness in his voice should have bothered her, should have set off every alarm bell her mother had ever installed about men who tried to own women. But instead, it sent heat curling low in Mila's belly, made her feel claimed in a way that had nothing to do with control and everything to do with choice. I'm not a possession, she said quietly, testing. No, Dominic agreed. You're not. You're a woman who's choosing to be here, who's choosing me. And I'm choosing you back, publicly, so there's no confusion about where we stand. Mila swallowed hard. People are going to talk. Let them. They're going to say terrible things about me, about why you're with me. Dominic's expression darkened. And I will destroy anyone who says them where I can hear. You can't fight the whole world, Dominic. Watch me. The food arrived, interrupting the moment. Mila picked at her salmon, her appetite warring with nerves. Across the table, Dominic ate with the same controlled precision he brought to everything, but she could feel his attention on her like a physical touch. Halfway through the meal, a man approached their table. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and a suit that screamed old money. His smile was all teeth and no warmth as he stopped beside Dominic's chair. "Vale," he said smoothly, "didn't expect to see you here tonight, and with company, no less." Dominic didn't stand, didn't even look up from his plate. "Marchetti, I'm having dinner. Unless you have something urgent to discuss, this isn't the time." Marchetti's gaze slid to Mila, his eyes traveling over her with the kind of assessment that made her skin crawl. "Just surprised is all. You're usually more discreet about your personal affairs. Is there a point to this conversation?" Dominic's voice had gone arctic. "Just making an observation." Marchetti smiled wider. "Your father, God rest his soul, he knew the value of keeping certain things private, mixing business with pleasure. It can get messy, dangerous even." Dominic set down his fork very carefully. When he looked up at Marchetti, his expression was blank in a way that made Mila's blood run cold. "My father," Dominic said quietly, "is dead. I'm not. And how I conduct my personal life is none of your fucking concern. Are we clear?" Marchetti's smile faltered. "Of course, my apologies. I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." Dominic stood, his height suddenly menacing in the intimate space. "And now you're going to walk away before I decide to take offense. Because if I take offense, Marchetti, you're not going to enjoy what happens next." The older man paled. He glanced at Mila one more time, then turned and walked away quickly, nearly tripping over his own feet in his haste. Dominic sat back down like nothing had happened. He picked up his wine glass, took a sip, then met Mila's wide-eyed stare. "You okay?" he asked calmly. "You just threatened a man in the middle of a crowded restaurant," Mila said numbly. "I warned him. There's a difference." Dominic's expression softened slightly. "He was disrespectful. To you. I don't tolerate that." "Who is he?" "Someone who used to work with my father. Someone who thinks he still has influence because of old loyalties." Dominic's jaw tightened. "He's wrong." Mila set down her own glass, her hands trembling. "This is what it's going to be like, isn't it? People testing you, using me to get under your skin." "Probably," Dominic admitted, "for a while. Until they learn." "Learn what?" His gaze was steady, unflinching. "That I meant what I said. That you're not negotiable. That I'll go to war over you if I have to." Mila's chest tightened. She wanted to tell him he was insane, that no one was worth that kind of risk. But the words stuck in her throat, because part of her, the part that had spent 28 years being invisible, desperately wanted to believe him. They finished dinner in relative quiet, though Mila noticed the way other diners kept glancing over, the whispered conversations that followed them as Dominic led her back to the car. Vincent was waiting by the passenger door, his expression grim. "We have a problem," he said quietly. Dominic's entire demeanor shifted. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that couldn't wait until you got home." Vincent's gaze flicked to Mila. "Maybe Miss Ross should—" "She stays!" Dominic's tone left no room for argument. "Talk." Vincent hesitated, then pulled out his phone and showed Dominic the screen. Mila couldn't see what was on it from where she stood, but she watched Dominic's expression go cold and hard. "When?" he asked. 20 minutes ago. They hit the East Warehouse, took out 3 of our guys, burned half the inventory." Vincent's voice was tight. "It's the Kozlov crew. Has to be. They left their signature." Dominic was silent for a long moment. Then he handed the phone back and turned to Mila. "Get in the car," he said gently. "Dominic, please." His hand cupped her cheek. "I need to handle this. And I need to know you're safe while I do." Mila wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle whatever came next. But the look in Dominic's eyes stopped her. Not fear, but something colder. Something that reminded her exactly who she was falling for. She got in the car. The drive back to the mansion was tense and silent. Vincent drove while Dominic made a series of rapid phone calls. His voice clipped and emotionless as he gave orders Mila tried not to understand. When they pulled through the estate gates, she saw men moving in the shadows. More security than usual, all armed, all alert. Dominic walked her to her suite, his hand never leaving the small of her back. "Lock the door," he said when they reached her room. Don't open it for anyone but me or Maria. Understand? What are you going to do? Mila asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. Dominic kissed her forehead, soft and lingering. What I have to. I'll come back when it's done. Promise me you'll be careful. His smile was sharp-edged and dangerous. I promise I'll come back. Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hallway, and Mila was left standing in her doorway with her heart in her throat. She locked the door like he'd told her to, tried to sleep, failed miserably. At 2 a.m, she gave up and moved to the window, staring out at the darkened grounds. Somewhere out there, Dominic was doing God knows what to people who'd made the mistake of challenging him. And she was here, safe and useless, waiting like some princess in a tower. The thought made her angry, made her feel like the old Mila, the one who'd hidden and stayed quiet and let the world tell her she didn't matter. She was so lost in her thoughts that she almost missed the movement at the edge of the garden. Mila froze, her breath catching. There, near the tree line, a figure dressed in black, too far away to identify, but definitely not part of the estate security. She watched as the person moved closer to the house, keeping to the shadows, moving with purpose. Her phone was in her hand before she could think. She pulled up Dominic's number, typed a message with shaking fingers. Someone's on the grounds. East side, near the gardens. The response came back in seconds. Stay in your room. Locking down now. Mila's heart pounded. She backed away from the window, suddenly hyper-aware of how exposed she was. The lights in her suite blazed like a beacon, announcing her exact location to anyone watching. She killed the lights and crouched by the bed, her phone clutched in both hands. Outside, alarms began to wail. The next 10 minutes were the longest of Mila's life. She heard shouting, the sound of running feet, what might have been gunshots in the distance. Her phone stayed silent. The darkness pressed in from all sides. Then her door handle rattled. Mila's breath stopped. The handle turned slowly, deliberately, testing the lock. Mila, Vincent's voice muffled through the wood. It's me. Open up. She didn't move. Dominic had said not to open for anyone but him or Maria. Mila, come on. Dominic sent me to get you. We need to move you to a secure location. Still, she hesitated. Something felt wrong. Vincent's voice was too calm, too measured. I'm not opening the door, she called back. Not until Dominic tells me to himself. Silence. Then, smart girl. The voice that responded wasn't Vincent's. Mila scrambled backward as something heavy slammed into the door. The frame shuddered but held. Another impact, and she heard wood beginning to splinter. She grabbed the nearest heavy object, a lamp, and backed into the bathroom, her phone screen glowing as she pulled up Dominic's number again. The door burst open just as she hit dial. 2 men entered, both armed, both strangers. The taller one smiled when he saw her. There you are, he said in accented English. Mr. Kozlov would like a word. Mila threw the lamp. It hit the first man in the chest, buying her half a second. She slammed the bathroom door and locked it, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. Mila? Dominic's voice, sharp with urgency. What's happening? They're in my room, she gasped. 2 men. They said someone named Kozlov. Fuck! She heard shouting on his end, the screech of tires. Listen to me. The bathroom window. Can you reach it? Mila looked up. The window was small, high on the wall. Maybe. I don't know if I can. You can. Dominic's voice was steel. You're going to break it and climb through. There's a ledge outside that runs to the east balcony. Stay on the phone with me. I'm 3 minutes out. The bathroom door shook as something slammed into it. Dominic, do it now, Mila. Move. She moved. The window shattered under the impact of her elbow wrapped in a towel. She hauled herself up, her body protesting, glass cutting into her palms. Behind her, she heard the bathroom door crack. Then she was through, her feet finding the narrow ledge, the night air cold against her skin. She pressed her back against the wall, inching sideways, her phone still clutched in one bloody hand. I'm out, she whispered. I'm on the ledge. Keep going, 20 feet to your right. Don't look down. She looked down, immediately regretted it. The ground was 3 stories below, and the ledge was maybe 8 inches wide. Mila, eyes forward, talk to me. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice breaking. I know, but you're doing it anyway. That's what brave looks like. Dominic's voice wrapped around her like armor. 10 more feet, baby. You've got this. Baby. He'd never called her that before. The endearment gave her enough courage to keep moving. Her foot slipped once, and she heard herself scream, but she caught herself. Kept going. The balcony came into view, solid and real and close enough to touch. She threw herself over the railing and collapsed onto the stone floor, gasping. I made it, she choked out. I see you. Dominic's voice was suddenly dual, through the phone and from below. She looked down to see him standing in the garden, flanked by armed men, his face turned up toward her. Stay there. We're coming up. 2 minutes later, Dominic burst onto the balcony with Vincent and 3 others behind him. He crossed the space in 3 strides and pulled Mila into his arms, his hands running over her frantically, checking for injuries. You're bleeding, he said hoarsely, looking at her torn palms. I'm okay. Dominic, those men are dead. His voice was flat, final. He looked at Vincent. Tell me we got them all. Both targets neutralized. We're sweeping the rest of the property now. Vincent's expression was grim. But, boss, they got through our perimeter. Someone inside had to have helped them. Dominic's arms tightened around Mila. Then find them. I don't care how long it takes. Find every person who had a hand in this and bring them to me. Vincent nodded and left, taking the other men with him. Alone on the balcony, Dominic finally let himself look at Mila properly. His hand cupped her face, and she saw something raw and desperate in his eyes. I almost lost you, he said quietly, but you didn't. Mila covered his hand with her own, ignoring the sting of her cuts. I'm right here. This is my fault. I made you visible, made you a target. Stop. Mila pulled back enough to meet his eyes. You didn't make me anything. You saw me. There's a difference, and I'd rather be seen and in danger than invisible and safe. At least now I know I matter to someone. Dominic's expression cracked. He kissed her then, desperate and claiming, and Mila kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. No more hiding, he murmured. From anyone. They want to come after you? Let them try. I'll show them exactly what happens when they touch what's mine. Mila smiled against his mouth. Yours? Mine, Dominic confirmed. If you'll have me. She answered by pulling him down for another kiss. And somewhere in the city, in a penthouse office overlooking the harbor, Alexei Kozlov received word that his men had failed. He smiled. The game, it seemed, had only just begun. The sun rose over a mansion transformed into a fortress. Mila watched from Dominic's bedroom window as armed guards patrolled the grounds in pairs, their routes calculated and overlapping. Security cameras had been installed overnight at every possible entrance. The gates now required biometric scanning in addition to key cards. Vincent had tripled the staff, bringing in men Dominic trusted with his life, or more accurately, with hers. She should have felt safe. Instead, she felt like a prisoner. Your hands, Dominic said from behind her. Mila turned to find him standing in the doorway of his bathroom, shirtless, a first aid kit in his hands. He'd brought her to his room after the attack, refusing to let her out of his sight, and she'd spent the rest of the night curled against his chest while he made phone calls and issued orders in a voice that promised violence. She hadn't slept. Neither had he. Now he crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, patting the space beside him. Let me see. Mila held out her palms. The cuts from the broken window had stopped bleeding hours ago, but they still looked angry and raw. Dominic took her hands gently, his touch impossibly careful as he cleaned each wound with antiseptic. This is going to sting, he warned before dabbing at the deepest cut. Mila hissed but didn't pull away. She watched his face instead, the concentration in his dark eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way his hands trembled almost imperceptibly as he worked. This man had probably orchestrated dozens of murders without blinking, but bandaging her cuts made him shake. Talk to me, Dominic said quietly, not looking up from his work. You've been silent for hours. What do you want me to say? Mila's voice came out hollow. That I'm scared? That I keep seeing those men breaking down my door? That I can't stop thinking about what would have happened if you'd been 5 minutes later? Dominic's hand stilled. Mila, I climbed out a third-story window last night, Dominic. I could have fallen. I could have died. And for what? Because some man I've never met decided I'm a convenient way to hurt you? Yes. Dominic set down the antiseptic and met her eyes. That's exactly why this happened, because Alexei Kozlov saw an opportunity to weaken me, and he took it. Because in my world, the people you care about become weapons your enemies use against you. Then maybe you shouldn't care about me, Mila said, and hated how small her voice sounded. Dominic's expression hardened. He finished bandaging her hands in silence, then stood and crossed to the window, his back rigid. When he spoke, his voice was controlled in a way that made Mila's chest ache. Is that what you want? For me to stop caring? To send you away? Give you money? Pretend the last 2 weeks never happened? He turned to face her. Because I can do that, Mila. I can have you on a plane to anywhere in the world by noon. New identity, new life, completely off Kozlov's radar. Just say the word. Mila stared at him, her throat tight. Would you forget about me? If I left? No. The word was immediate, absolute. I'd spend the rest of my life remembering you, wanting you, knowing I let you walk away because I was too much of a coward to fight for you. You're not a coward, Mila whispered. Then neither are you. Dominic crossed back to her, kneeling in front of the bed so they were eye level. I know you're scared. I know this isn't the life you imagined for yourself. But I'm not letting you go, Mila. Not because I'm keeping you prisoner, but because I know you don't actually want to leave. You just want the fear to stop. He was right, and that terrified her more than anything. How do we make it stop? She asked. Dominic's smile was sharp and cold. We remind Alexei Kozlov why people fear me, and we make sure he understands that touching you was the biggest mistake of his life. The meeting took place in the mansion's war room, a space Mila had never seen before, buried in the basement behind 3 locked doors and enough security to guard a bank vault. Dominic led her down personally, his hand firm at the small of her back, Vincent trailing behind them. You don't have to sit in on this, Dominic said as they reached the final door. I can have Maria take you back upstairs. No. Mila's voice was steadier than she felt. If this is about me, I should be here. Dominic studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Stay close to me. Don't speak unless I ask you to. And if I tell you to leave, you leave. Understood? Understood. The war room was exactly what it sounded like. A large space dominated by a conference table, screens mounted on every wall showing security feeds and city maps, and a dozen of Dominic's top people already seated and waiting. They all stood when he entered, their eyes immediately finding Mila and calculating. Dominic pulled out a chair for her at his right hand, a position of clear significance. The message was obvious. She wasn't just some woman he was sleeping with. She was under his protection, part of his inner circle, someone who mattered. Vincent closed the door and locked it. Sit, Dominic ordered, and everyone obeyed. He remained standing, his hands braced on the table, his presence dominating the room. Last night, 2 of Alexei Kozlov's men breached our security and attempted to abduct Miss Ross from her suite. They failed. Both are dead. But the fact that they got inside at all means we have a problem. He looked at Vincent. Tell them what you found. Vincent stood, pulling up images on the main screen. The breach came from the west perimeter. Security footage shows someone disabled the cameras and alarms from the inside at exactly 11:43 p.m. We've identified the responsible party, one of our own guards hired 6 months ago. He was found an hour ago trying to leave the property with $50,000 in cash. Where is he now? Asked James Park, the financial controller. Basement holding cell, Vincent replied, waiting for Mr. Vale's instructions. Dominic's expression was carved from ice. Kozlov bought one of my men, used him to get to Mila, which means this wasn't just an attack, it was a message. He's telling me he can reach inside my own house, that nowhere is safe, that everyone can be bought. So we send a message back, said Marcus Chen, who'd apparently been allowed back into Dominic's good graces after his earlier transgression. Hit one of his operations. Make it hurt. No. Dominic's voice cut through the murmurs of agreement. We don't hit an operation, we hit him directly, publicly. I want Alexei Kozlov to understand that there are consequences for what he did last night. And I want everyone else in this city to understand that Mila Ross is untouchable. The room went silent. Boss, Vincent said carefully, if we go after Kozlov directly, this turns into a full-scale war. His organization is almost as big as ours. The casualties will be significant, Dominic finished. I know, but this stops here. No half measures, no proportional responses. Kozlov tried to take something that belongs to me. I'm going to make sure he regrets it for however long he has left to live. Mila's breath caught. She'd known Dominic was dangerous, had seen glimpses of the violence he was capable of, but this was different. This was him declaring war over her, risking everything he'd built because someone had dared to threaten her. She should have told him to stop, should have insisted this wasn't worth it. Instead, she stayed silent and let him burn the world down for her. The meeting lasted another hour, with Dominic's people mapping out strikes and defenses, discussing alliances and betrayals, planning violence with the same efficiency other people used for quarterly budgets. Mila listened to it all, understanding maybe half, horrified and fascinated in equal measure. When it was over and the room cleared, Dominic turned to her. Say it, he said quietly. Say what? Whatever you're thinking. I can see it on your face. Mila took a breath. You're going to start a war because of me. People are going to die. Your people, his people, maybe innocent people who just get caught in the crossfire. And I know I should tell you to stop, to find another way, but... Her voice broke. But I can't, because for the first time in my life, someone's choosing me, fighting for me. And I'm selfish enough to want that, even if it costs blood. Dominic crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. You're not selfish. You're human. And you deserve to be chosen, Mila. You've always deserved it. She buried her face against his chest. What happens now? Now I make sure Kozlov understands the price of his mistake. And then... He pulled back to look at her. Then I'm taking you somewhere he can't reach you while I finish this. What? No, Dominic, I'm not leaving. You're not leaving, he agreed. You're staying exactly where I can protect you, but not here. Somewhere Kozlov doesn't know about. Somewhere I can lock down completely. His hand cupped her face. I need to know you're safe while I do what needs to be done. Can you give me that? Mila wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle whatever came next, but the look in Dominic's eyes stopped her. Not fear, but something deeper. Desperation. Need. Okay, she whispered. Where are we going? Dominic's smile was grim. Somewhere no one will think to look. The safe house was a penthouse apartment in the financial district, 30 floors of glass and steel in a building Dominic owned through a shell corporation. Mila stood in the living room, staring out at the city lights, while Vincent's team swept every room for bugs and security vulnerabilities. Previous owner was a tech CEO who pissed off the wrong people, Dominic explained, joining her at the window. I acquired it quietly 3 years ago. Only 5 people know it exists, and 4 of them are downstairs running security. You'll be safe here. And you? Mila turned to face him. Where will you be? Handling Kozlov. Dominic's expression was unreadable. I'll visit when I can, but for the next few days, you're going to see a lot more of Vincent than me. As if on cue, Vincent appeared in the doorway. Perimeter's clear. Security systems are active. We've got eyes on every entrance and exit. She's locked down tight. Good. Dominic turned to Mila. Vincent stays with you. You don't leave this apartment for any reason. Food will be delivered, and Maria will come by to keep you company, but otherwise you stay put. Understood? Mila nodded, though everything in her rebelled against being locked away like some damsel in a tower. Dominic must have seen it on her face because he pulled her aside, away from Vincent's hearing. I know you hate this, but I can't fight Kozlov and worry about you at the same time. I need to know you're protected. Can you do this for me? Just a few days? How many is a few? Mila asked quietly. However long it takes. Dominic kissed her forehead. But I'll end it as fast as I can. I promise. He left an hour later after triple-checking the security and giving Vincent instructions that bordered on paranoid. Mila watched from the window as his car pulled away, disappearing into the city traffic, and felt suddenly, overwhelmingly alone. "He'll come back," Vincent said from behind her. Mila glanced over her shoulder. Dominic's head of security stood in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "You sound certain." "I've known him 15 years, worked for him for 10, and I've never seen him like this with anyone." Vincent moved into the room, keeping a respectful distance. "He's always been focused, controlled, 3 steps ahead of everyone else. But you? You make him reckless. Make him feel things he's spent his whole life avoiding. It scares the hell out of him, which is why he's being so careful with you." "Careful," Mila repeated. "He just declared war on another crime lord. Like I said, reckless." Vincent's mouth twitched. "But for what it's worth, I think you're good for him. He's been running on rage and ambition for so long, he forgot what it's like to want something just because it makes him happy. You remind him." Mila turned back to the window. "I'm going to get him killed." "Maybe," Vincent said bluntly. "Or maybe you're going to give him a reason to be smarter about the risks he takes. Either way, he's all in. Has been since the second he heard you crying in that laundry room. Might as well accept it." The next 3 days were the longest of Mila's life. She woke each morning in an unfamiliar bed, ate meals she had no appetite for, and spent hours staring at her phone waiting for updates that rarely came. Dominic called when he could, brief conversations where he asked about her day and carefully avoided telling her about his. She could hear the exhaustion in his voice, the strain, but every time she asked if he was okay, he deflected. Maria visited on day 2, bringing fresh clothes and gossip from the mansion. "The whole staff's on edge," she said, settling onto the couch with tea. "Half the security team is out doing God knows what, and Mr. Vale's been in meetings for 2 days straight. But he asks about you every time I see him, wants to know if you're eating, sleeping, staying safe." "I'm fine," Mila lied. "Has anything happened? With Kozlov?" Maria's expression shuddered. "Above my pay grade, honey. But if the rumors are true, 3 of Kozlov's warehouses burned down yesterday. No casualties, just millions in lost product. Message received, I'd guess." Mila's stomach twisted. This was real. This was actually happening. Men were losing fortunes, risking their lives, all because Dominic Vale had decided she was worth protecting. On the 3rd night, she was half asleep on the couch when her phone rang. Dominic's name flashed on the screen. "Hey," she answered, her voice rough with sleep. "Did I wake you?" He sounded tired but alert. "No, maybe. I don't know what time it is." Mila sat up, pushing hair out of her face. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Better now that I'm hearing your voice." There was background noise, voices, movement. "I'm sorry I haven't called more. Things have been violent," Mila finished. Dominic was quiet for a moment. "Yes, but effective. Kozlov's hurting. His people are nervous, and his suppliers are asking questions. A few more days and he'll be ready to talk terms." "And then what?" "Then we negotiate. I make it clear that you're off limits, permanently, and he agrees because the alternative is watching everything he's built burn to ash." Dominic's voice hardened. "And if he doesn't agree, I burn it anyway and deal with the consequences." Mila closed her eyes. "When can I see you?" "Tomorrow. I'll come by around noon." His tone softened. "I miss you, Mila. This apartment, this distance, I fucking hate it. But I need to finish this first. Need to make sure you can come home without looking over your shoulder." "Home," Mila repeated. "You mean the mansion?" "I mean, wherever I am," Dominic said quietly. "That's home now. For both of us." Mila's throat tightened. "Dominic, I have to go. Vincent's there if you need anything. Lock the doors, don't answer for anyone but me, and—" He paused. "And know that I'm coming back to you. No matter what." He hung up before she could respond. Mila sat in the dark apartment, her phone clutched in both hands, and let herself cry. Dominic arrived the next day at exactly noon, looking like he'd aged 5 years in 3 days. His suit was impeccable as always, but there were shadows under his eyes and a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. When Mila opened the door, he pulled her into his arms without a word, his face buried in her hair. "Are you okay?" she asked against his chest. "Better now." Dominic pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. "God, I missed you. 3 days felt like 3 months. You look exhausted." "I am exhausted, but we're close, Mila. Kozlov's starting to crack. His people are deserting, his allies are backing off, and his cash flow is strangled. Another week, maybe less, and this is over." Mila led him to the couch. "Tell me what happened. The truth, not the sanitized version." Dominic sighed but didn't argue. "We hit his supply chains first, warehouses, distribution centers, anything that made him money. Then we turned his own people against him, offered better deals, more protection, a future that didn't involve waiting for the inevitable FBI raid. 3 of his top lieutenants have already switched sides. And Kozlov himself? Holed up in his penthouse with a skeleton crew, making threats he can't back up." Dominic's smile was cold. "He's desperate, which makes him dangerous but also predictable. He'll reach out soon, asking for a meet, and when he does, I'm going to make him regret ever hearing your name." Mila took his hand, her thumb tracing the scars on his knuckles. "What if he doesn't want to negotiate? What if he wants blood?" "Then I'll give him mine before I let him touch you again." Dominic's gaze was steady, absolute. "I know that scares you. I know you didn't sign up for this kind of violence. But I need you to understand something, Mila. I've killed men for looking at me wrong. I've destroyed lives over business disputes. But what I'm doing now, fighting for you, this is the first time violence has felt like it actually meant something. The first time I'm not just destroying, I'm protecting. And I'll do it for as long as you'll let me." Mila's eyes burned. "I don't know how to be worth all this." "You don't have to know. You just have to exist." Dominic pulled her closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You think you're ordinary, Mila, some invisible woman the world overlooked. But I see you, and what I see is extraordinary. You're brave enough to climb out windows, strong enough to stand in rooms full of killers and not flinch, honest enough to tell me when you're scared instead of pretending you're fine. That's not ordinary, that's fucking remarkable." Mila kissed him then, desperately, trying to pour everything she couldn't say into the press of her lips against his. Dominic responded immediately, his hands tangling in her hair, his mouth claiming hers with a hunger that made her head spin. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "Come back to the mansion with me," he said. "I know it's not as secure as here, but I can't stand being away from you anymore. I'll lock down the entire estate if I have to. Just come home." Mila pulled back to look at him. "Is it safe?" "Safe enough. And I'll make it safer." His thumb traced her lower lip. "I want you in my bed, Mila. Want to wake up next to you. Want to have breakfast together and argue about what to watch on TV and do all the normal things people do when they're—" He stopped, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "When they're what?" Mila prompted softly. Dominic's eyes met hers, and the raw honesty in them stole her breath. "When they're falling in love," he finished quietly. The world seemed to stop. Mila stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. "You're falling in love with me?" "I fell weeks ago," Dominic admitted. "Probably the second you looked at me like I was just a man instead of a monster. I've been trying to convince myself it was just attraction, just wanting to protect something innocent in my fucked up world. But the truth is simpler than that. I love you, Mila Ross, and I'm done pretending I don't." Mila's hand shook as she reached up to cup his face. "I love you too. I think I have since you made Marcus apologize to me. Since you saw me when everyone else looked through me. Since you made me believe I could be chosen." Dominic kissed her again, softer this time, reverent. "Then come home with me. Let me show you what being chosen looks like every single day for the rest of our lives." "Yes," Mila whispered against his mouth. "Yes." They left the penthouse an hour later, Dominic's security surrounding them like a human shield. The drive back to the mansion felt different somehow, less like fleeing to safety and more like choosing to fight. When they pulled through the gates, Mila saw the changes immediately. More guards, more cameras, the entire property radiating a message of absolute defense. Dominic led her inside, past staff who nodded respectfully, up the stairs to his private quarters. He'd had her things moved from the second-floor suite, her clothes now hanging beside his in the massive closet, her books stacked on the nightstand next to his. "I had Maria set everything up," Dominic said, watching her take it in. "If you want anything changed—" "It's perfect," Mila interrupted. She turned to face him. "All of it. This. Us. I know I should probably be terrified, and part of me is, but mostly I just feel seen," Dominic finished. "Yes." Mila smiled. "Seen, chosen, like I finally matter." Dominic crossed to her and pulled her close. "You've always mattered, Mila. The world was just too blind to notice. But I'm not. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know exactly how much you're worth." That night, Mila fell asleep in Dominic's arms, safe and warm and loved. And across the city, in a penthouse overlooking the harbor, Alexei Kozlov made a phone call that would change everything. "I want to meet," he said in Russian. "Just the two of us. Tomorrow. I'm ready to talk terms." The man on the other end of the line, Dominic Vale, smiled. "Tomorrow, then. And Kozlov? Come alone. Because if I see so much as one of your men within a mile of the meeting point, the deal is off and I start burning your world down, neighborhood by neighborhood." "Understood," Kozlov replied. "But Vale, you should know. I don't negotiate from positions of weakness. I'm coming to that table with leverage you're not going to like." "Then bring it," Dominic said coldly. "Because there's nothing you have that's worth more to me than her safety. Nothing you can threaten that will make me back down. So save your leverage and just agree to leave Mila Ross alone. It's the only way this ends without your funeral." He hung up. In the bedroom, Mila stirred against him. "Who was that?" "No one important," Dominic lied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Go back to sleep." But as she drifted off, Dominic stared at the ceiling and planned for war. Because Alexei Kozlov had made one critical mistake. He thought Dominic was bluffing about how far he'd go. Tomorrow, he'd learn the truth, and it would be the last lesson of his life. Dominic left before dawn. Mila woke to find his side of the bed cold, a note on his pillow written in sharp, precise handwriting. "Meeting with Kozlov today. Vincent stays with you. Don't leave the house. I'll explain everything when I get back. I love you. D." She read it 3 times, her stomach twisting tighter with each pass. The meeting. The one that would either end this nightmare or escalate it into something worse. Dominic had been vague about the details last night, deflecting her questions with kisses and promises that everything would be fine. But Mila knew him well enough now to recognize when he was protecting her from the truth. She found Vincent in the kitchen, drinking coffee and reviewing security footage on a tablet. He looked up when she entered, his expression neutral. "He's gone already?" Mila asked, pouring herself a cup from the pot. "Left at 5. Wanted to scout the location before Kozlov arrived." Vincent set down the tablet. "He also left strict instructions that you stay inside today. No exceptions." "Where's the meeting?" Vincent hesitated. "I'm not supposed to tell you that." "Vincent, please, I can't just sit here not knowing." Mila's cat shook around her mug. "What if something goes wrong? What if Kozlov—" "The boss can handle himself," Vincent interrupted, but his tone was gentler than his words. "He's been doing this a long time, Miss Ross, and he's got 12 of our best men positioned around the perimeter. Kozlov would have to be suicidal to try anything." "Or desperate," Mila said quietly, which is exactly what Dominic said he was. Vincent didn't argue. The morning crawled by with excruciating slowness. Mila tried to distract herself, read a book, watch TV, even attempted to eat the breakfast Maria brought up. But nothing worked. Her mind kept circling back to Dominic, to the meeting, to all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong. At 11, her phone buzzed. A text from Dominic. "Meeting starting in 15. Everything's under control. I'll call you when it's done." Mila typed back. "Be careful. I love you." The response came immediately. "Always. Love you too." Then nothing. The next 2 hours were the worst of Mila's life. She paced the bedroom, checked her phone every 30 seconds, and tried not to imagine Dominic bleeding out in some warehouse while Kozlov's men stood over him. Vincent tried to reassure her, but even he seemed tense, his own phone constantly in his hand as he coordinated with the security team. At 1:30, Mila's phone rang. She grabbed it so fast she nearly dropped it. Dominic? It's done. His voice was rough, exhausted. Kozlov agreed to the terms. You're off limits permanently. He signed a document making it official, witnessed by both our people. It's over, Mila. Relief flooded through her so intensely she had to sit down. You're okay? You're not hurt? I'm fine, not a scratch. I'm on my way back now. She heard car doors slamming, engine starting. We'll talk when I get there, but the important part is you're safe. No one's coming after you again. What did you have to give him? Mila asked, because deals like this always had a price. To make him agree? Dominic was quiet for a beat too long. Nothing I'll miss. I'll explain when I get home. 20 minutes. He hung up before she could press further. Mila looked at Vincent, who'd been listening to her side of the conversation. He's coming back. He said it's over. I heard. Vincent's expression was carefully blank. Guess we'll find out what that cost him soon enough. Dominic arrived exactly 20 minutes later, flanked by 4 guards and looking like he'd aged another year in the span of a few hours. But he was whole, uninjured, and when he saw Mila waiting in the foyer, his entire demeanor softened. Give us the room, he ordered, and the guards dispersed immediately. Mila crossed to him, her hands reaching for his face to check for injuries she knew weren't there. You're really okay? I'm really okay. Dominic caught her hands and kissed her palms, right over the healing cuts from the window. Kozlov was exactly as desperate as I thought, losing money, losing men, watching his empire crumble. He was ready to deal. What were the terms? Dominic led her to the sitting room and pulled her down beside him on the couch. You are untouchable. Any member of his organization, anyone he has influence over, anyone who even considers coming after you, Kozlov guaranteed he'll handle it himself. He breaks the agreement. I have authorization from 3 neutral parties to wipe him out completely. No negotiations, no second chances. And in exchange, Mila pressed. Dominic's jaw tightened. I agreed to stay out of the port district. It's his territory, always has been, but I've been eyeing expansion there for years. That's off the table now, permanently. Mila stared at him. You gave up an entire section of the city. For me. It's just geography, Mila. Buildings and docks and shipping routes. Dominic's hand cupped her face. You're irreplaceable. The port district isn't. So yes, I made that trade, and I'd make it again without hesitation. How much money are you losing? Millions, probably. Over time. He smiled at her stricken expression. I have millions to lose, baby. Trust me. We're not going to be eating ramen and living in a studio apartment. The empire will be fine. We'll be fine. Mila's eyes burned. Everyone's going to say you went soft, that you let a woman make you weak. Let them say it. Dominic's thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped. I'd rather be soft and have you than hard and alone. Besides, his smile turned sharp. Anyone who thinks protecting what I love makes me weak is welcome to test that theory. They'll find out exactly how dangerous I am when I'm fighting for something that matters. I don't know how to be worth all this, Mila whispered, the same words she'd said before, the fear that lived in her chest like a second heartbeat. You don't have to know. You just have to stay. Dominic pulled her into his lap, his arms wrapping around her like a vice. Stay with me, Mila. Build a life with me. Let me prove every day that you're worth more than ports and territories and money. Let me choose you over and over until you finally believe you deserve to be chosen. Mila buried her face in his neck and let herself cry. Tears of relief and fear and overwhelming love for this complicated, dangerous, tender man who'd upended her entire world. I'm staying, she said against his skin. I'm not going anywhere. Dominic held her tighter. Good, because I'm not done fighting for you yet. For 3 days, everything was perfect. Dominic kept his promise. He woke up next to Mila every morning, had meals with her, spent evenings curled on the couch watching movies she picked and he pretended to care about. They talked about futures that had once seemed impossible, about the life they'd build together, about whether she wanted to go back to school or find work that actually mattered to her. Mila felt herself transforming, not into someone new, but into who she'd always been underneath the layers of shame and invisibility. She laughed more, spoke her mind without apologizing, started to believe slowly that maybe Dominic was right, Maybe she was worth choosing. The mansion staff noticed. Maria commented on how she glowed, how different she seemed. Even the guards treated her with respect that went beyond Dominic's protection, like they recognized she'd earned her place here through sheer force of will. On the fourth day, everything fell apart. Mila was in the library, curled in the window seat with a book, when Vincent appeared in the doorway. His expression was grim. "Miss Ross, I need you to come with me, now." Mila's heart dropped. "What happened? Is Dominic—" "He's fine, but there's been a development." Vincent's tone was careful, controlled. "He's in his office. He asked me to bring you down." Mila followed him through the mansion, her mind racing through worst-case scenarios. When they reached Dominic's office, she found him standing at his desk, his back rigid, staring at something on his laptop screen. James Park was there too, along with two other men Mila recognized from the war room. "Dominic?" she said quietly. He turned, and the look on his face made her stomach drop, rage and fear warring for dominance, his control hanging by a thread. "Come here," he said, his voice dangerously soft. Mila crossed to him. Dominic turned the laptop so she could see the screen. It was a video, paused on the first frame. The image showed Kozlov sitting in what looked like an upscale restaurant, wineglass in hand, smiling at someone off camera. "This was uploaded to a private server 2 hours ago," Dominic said. "Sent directly to me with a message. Did you really think it would be this easy?" He pressed play. The video showed Kozlov raising his glass in a mock toast. "To Dominic Vale," he said in heavily accented English, "who thinks he can buy peace with territory? Who thinks a signature on paper means anything in our world?" He leaned closer to the camera. "You took my money, Vale. You humiliated me in front of my people. You made me look weak. Did you really believe I'd let that stand?" Mila's blood ran cold. "The girl was never the target," Kozlov continued, his smile widening. "She was the bait, a way to make you emotional, reckless, a way to make you give up something valuable, like the Port District, for something worthless, and you fell for it beautifully." Dominic's hand clenched on the desk. "But here's the truth, Vale. I don't care about your little housemaid. I never did. What I care about is watching you squirm, watching you choose between your empire and your heart. So, here's my new offer." Kozlov's expression went cold. "You have 48 hours to return control of the Port District to me, plus an additional 20 million in compensation for my losses. If you do that, I forget about Mila Ross. She gets to live her little fairy tale life in your mansion, and everyone's happy." He paused for effect. "But if you refuse, I don't come after her. That would be too obvious, too traceable. Instead, I make sure the world knows exactly who she is. I release every detail of her pathetic little life. How she was the fat maid you fucked out of pity. How you've been slumming with the help while your real interests lie elsewhere. I'll destroy her reputation so thoroughly that she'll wish she'd died in that apartment." Kozlov leaned back, satisfied. 48 hours, Vale. The Port District and 20 million, or I make your girlfriend a laughingstock. Your choice. The video ended. Silence filled the office, heavy and suffocating. Mila felt like she'd been punched in the chest. She'd known men would mock her for being with Dominic, had prepared herself for whispers and judgment. But having it weaponized like this, turned into leverage, made her feel small and worthless all over again. "He's bluffing," James said finally. "He doesn't have anything on Miss Ross that would actually—" "He doesn't need truth," Dominic interrupted, his voice like broken glass. "He just needs a story that sounds plausible. Fat maid seduces crime lord, climbs her way into his bed for security. It doesn't matter that it's a lie. People will believe it because it fits their narrative. Because they can't imagine I'd actually choose her for who she is." Mila flinched at the word fat, even though Dominic wasn't using it as an insult. Just a statement of fact, the same fact the world had been throwing at her since puberty. "So what do we do?" Vincent asked. Dominic looked at Mila. "We call his bluff. We ignore the threat and dare him to follow through. If he releases anything, we deny it, discredit him, make him look desperate and pathetic. Or," Mila said quietly, "you give him what he wants." Every head in the room turned toward her. "Absolutely not," Dominic said immediately. Listen to me. Mila's voice was steadier than she felt. He's right about one thing. I'm not worth the Port District and $20 million. That's your livelihood, your power base. You give that up, and what? So I don't have to read mean things about myself online? So people don't call me names. I've been called my entire life? Mila, I've survived worse than public humiliation, Dominic. I've survived being invisible, being mocked, being told I'm worthless every single day. I can survive this too. She took a breath. But what I can't survive is watching you destroy everything you've built because of me. So give him the Port District, pay him the money, end this before it costs you more than just territory. Dominic crossed to her in 2 strides, his hands gripping her shoulders. You're asking me to let him win, to let him hurt you, and do nothing. I'm asking you to be smart, Mila said, to choose your empire over your pride, to remember that I fell in love with a man who thinks 10 steps ahead, not one who makes reckless choices because he's angry. This isn't about pride, Dominic said through clenched teeth. This is about the fact that he threatened you, that he thinks he can use you as leverage and I'll just roll over. If I give in now, Mila, it tells every enemy I have that the way to hurt me is through you. It makes you a permanent target. Mila hadn't thought of that. The logic was sound, terrifying, and completely derailed her argument. So what's the alternative? She asked. We refuse, he releases whatever lies he's concocted, and I spend the rest of my life being the punchline to a joke about how the crime lord fucked the fat maid? Or, Dominic said, his eyes glinting with something dangerous, we beat him to the story. We control the narrative before he can. Mila stared at him. What does that mean? Dominic turned to the room. Everyone out. Now. James, Vincent, and the others left without question. When the door closed, Dominic pulled Mila to the couch and sat her down. Kozlov's strategy relies on shame, he said. On the idea that you'll be embarrassed about how we met, about who you were before. That I'll be embarrassed to admit I fell in love with my housemaid. But what if we take that power away from him? How? Mila asked. Dominic's smile was sharp and fierce. We tell the story ourselves, on our terms. We announce our relationship publicly, not as something to hide, but as something to celebrate. I take you to every high-profile event in this city, introduce you as the woman I love, and dare anyone to say a fucking word about it. We make it impossible for Kozlov's lies to land because the truth is already out there. Mila's breath caught. You want to go public? Dominic, that's... People will crucify me. You know they will. Some will, Dominic agreed. The small-minded ones who can't imagine that power and wealth don't automatically come with shallow values. But others won't. Others will see what I see. A woman who's brave and honest and real. And the ones who matter, the ones whose opinions actually affect my business, they'll respect the fact that I'm not hiding you, that I'm claiming you openly. This could backfire spectacularly, Mila said, but she could hear the hope creeping into her voice. It could, Dominic admitted. But it's a better play than giving Kozlov what he wants or letting him control the narrative. And honestly, Mila, I'm tired of acting like you're something to be protected behind closed doors. I want the world to know you're mine. I want them to see us together and understand that you're not some secret I'm ashamed of. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Mila's eyes filled. You really mean that? Every word. Dominic pulled her close. So here's what I'm proposing. Tomorrow night, there's a charity gala downtown. Every important person in the city will be there. Politicians, business leaders, media. I was planning to skip it, but instead, we're going. Together. You wear something that makes you feel powerful. I wear a tux, and we walk in side by side. We dance. We're photographed. We make it absolutely clear that you're not the help anymore. You're the woman Dominic Vale chose to stand beside him. And if Kozlov still releases his lies, then they won't matter, because the truth is already out there. Dominic's hand cupped her face. But more importantly, you'll know that I'm not ashamed of you, that I'm not hiding you, that when I said I love you, I meant it publicly and privately. Can you do this? Will you do this with me? Mila thought about the old version of herself, the one who would have said no, who would have hidden and made herself small to avoid the inevitable judgment. Then she thought about the woman she was becoming, the one who'd climbed out a third-story window, who'd sat in war rooms and listened to men plot violence, who'd let herself be loved by someone who saw her when the rest of the world didn't. "Yes," she said. "Let's do it." Dominic kissed her, hard and claiming. "That's my girl. Now let's go tell Kozlov exactly what he can do with his 48-hour deadline." The response to Kozlov was delivered by Vincent personally, a single-line message that Dominic dictated with cold satisfaction. "We don't negotiate with terrorists. Do your worst." Then he called his publicist. The next 24 hours were a whirlwind of preparation. A stylist arrived at the mansion with racks of dresses, insisting that Mila needed something that made a statement. They settled on a floor-length gown in deep burgundy silk that hugged every curve, with a neckline that was elegant without being revealing. The stylist did her makeup, dramatic eyes, bold lips, and styled her hair in soft waves that made her look confident and expensive. When Mila looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. "You look like you belong in his world," Maria said softly, adjusting the dress one final time. "Like you were always meant to be there." "I don't feel like I belong," Mila admitted. "Fake it until you do," Maria smiled. "That's what everyone else at these things is doing anyway. Trust me." Dominic was waiting for her at the bottom of the stairs, devastating in a black tux that made him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine. When he saw Mila descending, his expression shifted, heat and possession and something softer all tangled together. "You're stunning," he said when she reached him. "I'm terrified," Mila corrected. "That too, but mostly stunning." Dominic offered his arm. "Ready to make Kozlov regret every decision he's ever made?" Mila took his arm, feeling the solid strength of him beside her. "Ready." The gala was held at the city's most prestigious hotel, a glittering affair with crystal chandeliers and champagne fountains, and enough wealth in one room to fund a small country. Mila had never been anywhere like it. She felt every eye turn toward them when they entered, heard the whispers start immediately. "That's Dominic Vale." "Who's the woman with him?" "I've never seen her before." "She's not his usual type." Dominic must have heard them too, but he didn't react. He kept his hand firm at the small of Mila's back as he led her through the crowd, stopping to greet people with the kind of easy confidence that came from owning the room. "Senator Walters, good to see you. This is Mila Ross, my girlfriend." "Marcus, been too long. Have you met Mila? She's been staying with me at the estate." "Catherine, you look lovely. I'd like to introduce you to someone very important to me. This is Mila." Every introduction was deliberate, claiming impossible to misinterpret. And with each one, Mila felt herself standing a little straighter, smiling a little more genuinely. Because Dominic wasn't just introducing her, he was challenging people to make something of it, to dare question his choice. No one did. Not to his face, anyway. They were halfway through the evening, Mila nursing a glass of champagne she was too nervous to drink, when a familiar figure approached. Alexei Kozlov, in an expensive suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Val," he said smoothly, "I see you received my message." Dominic's expression went cold. "I did. Rejected it. Figured you'd have noticed by now, since you're here making small talk instead of counting your money." Kozlov's smile tightened. "You're making a mistake. But I suppose—" His gaze slid to Mila, assessing and dismissive. "I suppose love makes fools of us all. Tell me, Miss Ross, how does it feel to be the most expensive whore in the city? 20 million in a port district. That's quite the price tag for a housemaid's pussy." Mila's face burned, but before she could respond, Dominic moved. His hand shot out, gripping Kozlov's throat, forcing the older man back against the nearest wall. The room went silent, hundreds of eyes turning toward the scene. "You just made your last mistake," Dominic said quietly, his voice carrying in the sudden hush. "You want to come after my territory? Fine. You want to threaten my business? I can handle that. But you disrespect her in front of me, in front of all these people, and I will end you, not your organization. You, personally." Kozlov's face was turning red. "You can't. Witnesses. Every person in this room knows what you are," Dominic continued, his grip tightening. "A desperate man grasping at relevance. And now they all know that you tried to use the woman I love as leverage and failed. that you resorted to crude insults because you had nothing else. How does it feel, Alexei, to be the one who's worthless? He released Kozlov, who stumbled forward, gasping. Security, Dominic called, his voice cutting through the shocked silence. Please escort Mr. Kozlov from the premises. He's not welcome here. Two large men in suits appeared immediately, taking Kozlov by the arms. The Russian glared at Dominic, at Mila, his expression promising retribution. This isn't over, he hissed. Yes, Dominic said coldly. It is. You're done, Kozlov. By tomorrow morning, every ally you have left will know what happened here tonight. They'll know you lost your temper, made threats you can't back up, and got humiliated in front of the city's elite. Your reputation is finished. You just don't know it yet. Kozlov was dragged away, still sputtering threats. The room slowly returned to life, conversations resuming with the kind of forced casualness that suggested everyone was pretending they hadn't just witnessed a crime lord nearly murder someone at a charity gala. Dominic turned to Mila, his expression softening immediately. Are you okay? Mila looked up at him, her heart pounding, and realized something profound. She wasn't okay. She was shaking, angry, humiliated by Kozlov's words. But she was also still standing, still here, still chosen. I'm okay, she said, but I think I need some air. Dominic led her to a private balcony overlooking the city. When they were alone, he pulled her into his arms. I'm sorry you had to hear that, he said quietly. I should have anticipated he'd be here. Should have… You defended me, Mila interrupted, in front of everyone. You could have laughed it off, minimized it, pretended it didn't matter, but you didn't. You made it clear that disrespecting me means consequences. Always, Dominic said fiercely. Anyone who tries to hurt you answers to me. I meant what I said in there, Mila. I love you. And I'm done letting anyone, Kozlov, the world, anyone, make you feel like you're anything less than extraordinary. Mila kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. When they broke apart, she was crying. I love you too, she whispered, and I'm done being afraid of what people think. If loving you means facing men like Kozlov, means dealing with judgment and cruelty, then fine. I'll do it, because you're worth it. Dominic's smile was tender and fierce all at once. We're worth it, together. They stayed on that balcony for a long time, holding each other while the city sprawled beneath them. And when they finally went back inside, Mila walked with her head high, Dominic's hand in hers, ready to face whatever came next. Because she'd finally learned the truth. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't worthless. She was loved, chosen, claimed, and nothing Kozlov or anyone else said could take that away from her. The photograph hit the internet at 3 a.m. Mila woke to the sound of Dominic's phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. She felt him tense beside her, felt the moment he saw whatever was on the screen, the way his entire body went rigid with controlled fury. What is it? She asked, her voice thick with sleep. Dominic didn't answer immediately. He sat up, scrolling through something with his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. Then he turned the phone toward her. The image was grainy, but clear enough. Mila in her old gray uniform, pushing a cleaning cart through the mansion's hallways. Someone had captured it months ago, back when she was still invisible, still just the help. The caption read, Dominic Vale's Cinderella story, from maid to mistress. How far would you go for a meal ticket? Below it, an article had been posted on 3 different gossip sites, each one spinning the same narrative Kozlov had threatened, that Mila had seduced her way into Dominic's bed, that she was using him for money and security, that the whole relationship was a calculated social climb by a desperate woman who knew she'd never find success any other way. They'd even dug up her past, comments from people she'd gone to high school with, anonymous sources claiming she'd always been hungry for attention and willing to do anything to escape her pathetic life. One particularly vicious quote came from someone claiming to be a former coworker. Mila always acted like she was better than the rest of us, but she was just another fat girl who thought sleeping with the boss was easier than actual work. Mila's hands shook as she took the phone. She read through the articles with a sick feeling spreading through her chest, each word landing like a physical blow. It's all lies, she said finally, though her voice wavered. These people, I don't even know half of them. They're making things up. I know. Dominic took the phone back, his expression dark. Kozlov paid them. Has to have. This is too coordinated, too fast. He probably had it ready to go before we even got to the gala last night. So, choking him in front of everyone was just, what, entertainment before he destroyed me anyway? Mila felt tears burning behind her eyes and hated herself for them. You said going public would protect me. You said, I know what I said. Dominic's voice was tight. And I miscalculated. I thought humiliating him publicly would make him back down. Instead, it made him desperate enough to burn his last bridge. He pulled Mila into his arms, his hand cradling the back of her head. But this doesn't change anything. These are lies, Mila. Anyone who knows us, anyone who matters, they'll see through it. Will they? Mila pulled back to look at him. Or will they see exactly what Kozlov wants them to see? A fat maid who got lucky enough to catch a rich man's attention and is milking it for everything it's worth? Stop. Dominic's hands framed her face. Stop letting his poison into your head. You are not what these articles say. You're not what those people claim. You're the woman I fell in love with, and nothing Kozlov fabricates changes that truth. Mila wanted to believe him, but as the sun rose and her phone started buzzing with messages from numbers she didn't recognize, as the articles spread across social media and the comments section filled with vitriol, belief became harder and harder to hold on to. By noon, the story had gone viral. News outlets were picking it up, spinning it as everything from a modern fairy tale to a cautionary tale about gold diggers in the digital age. Mila's face was everywhere. The old photo of her in the uniform, side by side with shots from last night's gala, where she'd looked confident and beautiful in Dominic's arms. The contrast was damning, designed to make people question how someone like her could possibly belong in his world. Dominic spent the morning on the phone, his voice cold and clipped as he coordinated damage control. His publicist wanted to issue a statement. His lawyers wanted to sue for defamation. His business partners wanted to know if this would affect their dealings. Mila sat in his office, watching him handle crisis after crisis, and felt the weight of it crushing her. This was her fault. All of it. If she'd just stayed invisible, stayed in her lane, none of this would be happening. Stop thinking whatever you're thinking, Dominic said suddenly, looking up from his laptop. I can see it on your face. You don't know what I'm thinking. You're thinking this is your fault, that if you'd been smarter, prettier, thinner, more acceptable to the world, we wouldn't be dealing with this. Dominic closed the laptop and crossed to her. And you're wrong. The only person at fault here is Kozlov. He's the one weaponizing your past. He's the one spreading lies, not you. But if you just what? Stayed hidden forever? Let the world tell you that you don't deserve to be loved? Dominic pulled her to her feet. No, I won't let you do this to yourself. I won't let Kozlov win by making you believe his narrative. Then what do we do? Mila's voice broke. Because right now, it feels like he already won. The whole world thinks I'm a joke, Dominic, a gold-digging maid who got lucky. How do we come back from that? Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then his expression shifted, something dangerous and certain settling into place. We don't come back from it, he said. We go through it. We face it head-on and we show everyone, Kozlov included, that their opinions don't matter, that we're not hiding, we're not apologizing, and we're sure as hell not breaking. How? Mila asked desperately. Dominic smiled, sharp and fierce. We get married, publicly, this week. We make it impossible for anyone to claim this is some temporary arrangement or a publicity stunt. We show them that when I said I chose you, I meant forever. Mila's breath caught. You want to marry me? Now? In the middle of all this? Especially in the middle of all this. Dominic's hand slid to her waist, solid and certain. Because I love you, Mila Ross. I want you to be my wife. And I'm not waiting for the world's permission or for Kozlov to be dealt with, or for some perfect moment that might never come. I'm asking you now, while everything's burning down around us, because that's when it matters most. Mila stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. This is insane. Probably, Dominic agreed, but so is everything else we've done. So what do you say? Will you marry me? Mila thought about the woman she'd been 3 months ago, invisible, silent, convinced she was unworthy of being chosen. Then she thought about who she'd become, who Dominic had helped her see she could be, brave, visible, loved. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Dominic kissed her then, deep and claiming and full of promise. When they broke apart, he was smiling, a real smile, the kind that made him look younger and lighter and impossibly handsome. "Good," he said, "because I already called the judge." The ceremony was set for 3 days later. Dominic made it happen with the kind of ruthless efficiency he brought to everything. He secured a private venue, a historic mansion overlooking the harbor, beautiful and intimate. He hired the best caterer in the city, brought in flowers that cost more than Mila's first car, and made sure every detail was perfect. But the guest list was small. Just Dominic's closest people, Vincent, James, Maria, a handful of others who'd proven their loyalty. No press, no spectacle, just them and the people who mattered. "I thought you wanted this to be public," Mila said the night before the wedding, watching Dominic review the final arrangements. "I want our marriage to be public," Dominic corrected. "The ceremony is ours, private, sacred. But tomorrow morning, I'm releasing a statement and photos to every media outlet in the city. By noon, everyone will know you're not my girlfriend anymore. You're my wife. And anyone who has something to say about it can take it up with me directly." Mila felt tears prick her eyes. "You've thought of everything." "I've tried." Dominic set down the papers and pulled her into his lap. "I know the last few days have been hell. I know you're scared about what happens after tomorrow, but I need you to trust me, Mila. Trust that this is right, that we're right." "I do trust you," Mila said. I'm terrified of being your biggest regret, of looking back in 5 years and realizing you sacrificed too much for someone who wasn't worth it." Dominic's expression went soft and fierce all at once. "You want to know what I'll regret in 5 years? Not marrying you sooner, not telling you I loved you the first night I heard you crying in that laundry room, not fighting harder to make you believe you deserve everything I want to give you." He pressed his forehead to hers. "You are not a sacrifice, Mila. You're the prize. And I'm the luckiest bastard in the world because you said yes." Mila kissed him, trying to pour everything she felt into it, love and fear and desperate hope all tangled together. "I love you so much it scares me." "Good," Dominic murmured against her lips. "Love should be a little terrifying. Means it's real." The wedding day dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect weather that felt like a good omen. Mila woke early, her stomach a mess of nerves and excitement. Maria arrived at 8 with a team of stylists, transforming Dominic's bedroom into a makeshift salon. "You're getting married today," Maria said, grinning as she helped Mila into the dress they'd chosen, a simple but elegant ivory gown that made her feel like herself, just elevated. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm about to jump off a cliff," Mila admitted. "But Dominic's at the bottom, so I guess I'll be okay." Maria laughed. "That's the spirit. Now hold still while we do your makeup. We're going for ethereal goddess, not terrified bride." By the time they finished, Mila barely recognized herself. The woman in the mirror looked confident, radiant, like someone who belonged in a world of mansions and empires, like someone who deserved to be chosen. "You look perfect," Maria said softly. "He's going to lose his mind when he sees you." Downstairs, Dominic was having a similar revelation. He stood in front of the mirror in his study, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time, and tried to remember the last time he'd been nervous. Probably never. Dominic Vale didn't do nervous. He did controlled, calculated, 3 steps ahead of everyone else. But today, waiting to marry Mila, his hands shook. "You good, boss?" Vincent asked from the doorway. Dominic turned. "Do I look good?" "You look like a man about to get everything he wants." Vincent smiled slightly. "Which is terrifying for the rest of us, but probably good for you." "I'm marrying her," Dominic said, like he still couldn't quite believe it. "In 2 hours, Mila Ross is going to be Mila Vale. My wife. Mine." "Congratulations," Vincent said, and meant it. "She's good for you. Makes you almost human." Dominic laughed. "Almost?" "Let's not get carried away." Vincent's expression turned serious. "For what it's worth, boss, I think you're doing the right thing. Fuck Kozlov. Fuck everyone who thinks they get a say in who you love. You found something real in all this darkness we live in. Don't let anyone take that from you. Dominic nodded, his throat tight. I won't. I promise you that. The ceremony was beautiful and intimate and over far too quickly. Mila stood in front of Dominic, holding his hands, barely hearing the judge's words because she was too focused on the man in front of her. He looked devastating in his tux, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel like the only person in the world. When it came time for vows, Dominic spoke first. Mila, he said quietly, his voice carrying in the hushed room. 3 months ago, I heard you say that women like you don't get to be wives, only secrets. And I knew in that moment that I was going to prove you wrong. Not because I pitied you or wanted to fix you, but because you were the first person in years who looked at me and saw a man instead of a monster. You gave me something I didn't know I was missing, hope that I could be more than the violence and power that built my empire. You made me want to be better, to deserve you. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the trust you're placing in me today. He paused, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. I love you, Mila Ross. I choose you. Today and every day after. Not because you're convenient or safe or what the world expects, but because you're brave and honest and real. Because you make me laugh and challenge me and refuse to let me hide behind my reputation. Because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be human. His voice dropped lower. You are not a secret. You are not hidden. You are my wife, my partner, my future. And I will protect that with everything I have. Mila was crying before he finished, tears streaming down her face as she tried to hold herself together long enough to say her own vows. Dominic, she began, her voice shaking, I spent 28 years believing I was invisible, that I didn't matter, that the best I could hope for was to be tolerated by a world that didn't want me. And then you saw me, really saw me. Not the maid, not the help, not the woman everyone looked through. You saw who I was underneath all the shame and fear, and you chose me anyway. She took a breath, steadying herself. You've given me so much, safety, love, a life I never thought I'd have. But the most important thing you've given me is the courage to believe I deserve it. To stand here in front of people and claim my place at your side without apologizing for it. You taught me that being chosen isn't about being perfect or acceptable to everyone. It's about finding someone who sees your flaws and your strengths and decides you're worth fighting for. Mila squeezed his hands. I love you, Dominic Vale. I choose you too. Not because you're powerful or wealthy or can protect me from the world, but because you're kind and fierce and honest about who you are. Because you make me feel brave. Because you looked at me in a laundry room and decided I mattered, and that changed everything. Her voice broke. I'm going to be your wife, your partner, and I promise I will stand beside you through whatever comes next, because you're worth fighting for, too. The judge cleared his throat, clearly moved. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Dominic didn't wait for the words to finish. He pulled Mila into his arms and kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning, like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. The small crowd erupted in applause, but Mila barely heard it. All she knew was the feeling of Dominic's mouth on hers, his hands holding her like she was precious, and the absolute certainty that this was exactly where she belonged. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic whispered against her lips, Hello, Mrs. Vale. Mila smiled through her tears. Hello, husband. The reception was small but joyful, full of toasts and laughter, and the kind of easy happiness that came from being surrounded by people who genuinely cared. Mila danced with Dominic, with Vincent, even with James, who admitted he had 2 left feet but wanted to congratulate her properly. She ate cake that tasted like clouds and drank champagne that went straight to her head and let herself feel, for the first time in her life, completely and utterly happy. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Dominic pulled her aside to the mansion's balcony overlooking the harbor. Ready for the next part? He asked. Mila looked up at him, confused. What next part? Dominic pulled out his phone and showed her the press release his publicist had prepared. It included photos from the ceremony. Mila in her dress, Dominic looking at her like she hung the moon, the two of them kissing as husband and wife. The statement was simple and direct. Dominic Vale is pleased to announce his marriage to Mila Vale, the woman he loves and the partner he chooses to build his future with. Any questions about their relationship can be directed to him personally. It goes live in 5 minutes, Dominic said. Are you ready for what comes after? The attention, the questions, the people who will have opinions about us? Mila thought about it. Thought about the articles that were probably still circulating, the comments calling her a gold digger, the judgment she'd face walking into rooms as Dominic Vale's wife. Then she thought about the vows they'd just exchanged, the life they were building, the man standing beside her who'd chosen her when the whole world said he shouldn't. I'm ready, she said. Let them talk. Let them judge. It doesn't change the truth, that I love you and you love me and we're in this together. Dominic's smile was brilliant. That's my wife. He hit send. Within minutes, the phones started ringing. The response was immediate and overwhelming. News outlets wanted interviews. Social media exploded with reactions ranging from supportive to viciously critical. Think pieces were written about class, love, and whether Cinderella stories still existed in the modern world. Kozlov's smear campaign was drowned out by the sheer volume of people discussing the wedding, analyzing the photos, debating whether Dominic had lost his mind or found something real. But through it all, Dominic and Mila stayed united. They didn't engage with the critics, didn't defend themselves to strangers who'd already made up their minds. Instead, they lived their lives, openly, unapologetically, exactly as they'd promised each other they would. A week after the wedding, Kozlov made his final move. He released a video, uploaded to the same gossip sites that had run his initial smear campaign. In it, he sat in his expensive penthouse, looking haggard and desperate, and made one last attempt to destroy what Dominic and Mila had built. Dominic Vale wants you to believe in fairy tales, Kozlov said to the camera. He wants you to think he married that woman out of love, but I know the truth. I know she's a weapon he's using to make himself look human, to make people forget he's a criminal who's built an empire on blood and fear. And when he's done with her, when she's served her purpose, he'll discard her like he discards everyone who stops being useful. He leaned forward, his expression twisted with rage. You think you won, Vale? You think marrying her makes you untouchable? You're weaker now than you've ever been, because love is a liability, and I'm going to exploit it until you break. The video ended with a threat. Watch your back, Mrs. Vale. Your husband has enemies, and now, so do you. Mila watched it in Dominic's office, her hands clenched in her lap. When it finished, she looked at her husband. He's not going to stop, she said quietly. Is he? No, Dominic admitted. He's lost everything. Money, respect, allies. All he has left is his hatred for us, which makes him dangerous. So what do we do? Dominic's expression was cold and final. We end him, permanently. The operation took 3 days to plan and 6 hours to execute. Dominic's people moved like shadows, gathering evidence of every illegal operation Kozlov had ever run, the trafficking, the money laundering, the violence. They compiled it into a dossier that was airtight and damning, then delivered it simultaneously to 3 different law enforcement agencies, along with an anonymous tip about where Kozlov could be found. The FBI raided his penthouse at dawn. Mila watched the news coverage from the safety of the mansion, Dominic's arm around her shoulders as federal agents led Kozlov out in handcuffs. The charges were extensive: racketeering, conspiracy, murder for hire. Enough to put him away for life, even with the best lawyers his remaining money could buy. It's over, Dominic said quietly. He can't hurt you from prison. Can't hurt either of us. You're sure? Mila asked. What if he has people on the outside? He had people on the outside. Past tense. Dominic's smile was grim. They all switched sides when I offered them better deals and guaranteed protection from prosecution. Kozlov's organization collapsed the second he was arrested. There's no one left to carry out his threats. Mila let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for months. So we're safe. Really safe. Really safe, Dominic confirmed. And really married. And really about to start the rest of our lives without looking over our shoulders. Mila turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd changed everything. What happens now? Dominic's expression softened. Now? We live, Mila. We build the life we promised each other. We figure out what you want to do, go back to school, start a business, whatever makes you happy. We travel. We argue about whose turn it is to pick the movie. We have lazy Sunday mornings and terrible first attempts at cooking together. We do all the normal things people in love do. Normal, Mila repeated, laughing. I don't think anything about us is normal. Then we'll make our own normal. Dominic kissed her forehead. You and me, together. No more hiding, no more fear, just us building something real. 3 months later, Mila stood in front of a lecture hall full of students, her heart pounding with familiar nerves. She'd enrolled in university, psychology, because she wanted to understand the human mind, wanted to help people who felt as invisible as she once had. Dominic had supported her completely, even helped her navigate the admissions process when imposter syndrome threatened to derail her applications. Now she was here, pursuing the education she'd abandoned years ago, and it felt like reclaiming a piece of herself she'd thought was lost forever. After class, she met Dominic for lunch at a cafe near campus. He was waiting at their usual table, already halfway through his coffee, and his face lit up when he saw her. How was it? He asked as she slid into the seat across from him. Terrifying and wonderful, Mila said honestly. I'm the oldest person in most of my classes, and everyone probably thinks I'm crazy for starting school at my age, but I don't care. It feels right. You're not crazy. You're brave. Dominic reached across the table to take her hand. I'm proud of you. Mila's throat tightened with emotion. Thank you. For everything. For making this possible. You made it possible, Dominic corrected. I just gave you the support you deserved. The rest is all you, Mrs. Vale. Mila smiled at the name, still not quite used to it but loving it more every day. How was your morning? Productive. Closed the deal on that property downtown, fired a guy who thought skimming from the books was a good idea, and confirmed our reservation for the Italy trip next month. Dominic's thumb traced circles on her palm. Oh, and I got a call from Senator Walters. She wants to meet with you. Mila blinked. With me? Why? Because you made an impression at the gala. She's starting a foundation for women's empowerment and education access, and she thinks your story, not Kozlov's version, your real story, would inspire the women she's trying to help. Dominic smiled. She wants you to speak at their launch event, if you're interested. Mila's first instinct was to say no, to hide, to avoid putting herself out there for judgment. But then she remembered who she was now. Not the invisible maid, but Mila Vale, wife, student, woman who'd fought for her place in the world and won. I'm interested, she said. I want to do it. Dominic's smile widened. Good. Because I already told her you would. Mila laughed, shaking her head. Confident, aren't you? In you? Always. That night, lying in bed with Dominic's arms around her, Mila thought about how far she'd come. From the woman crying in a laundry room to the woman planning a speaking engagement. From invisible to visible. From hidden to chosen. What are you thinking about? Dominic asked, his voice sleepy. How much I love you, Mila said honestly. How grateful I am that you saw me when no one else did. How lucky I am that you chose me. Dominic tightened his hold on her. I'm the lucky one, Mila. You gave me something I didn't know I needed. A reason to be more than the violence and power. A reason to build instead of destroy. You made me want to be worthy of you, and that changed everything. Mila turned in his arms to face him. We changed each other. Yeah, Dominic agreed softly. We did. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other. Two people who'd found something real in a world that told them they shouldn't fit together. And 6 months later, when Mila stood on a stage in front of 300 women and told her story, the real story, not the one Kozlov had fabricated, she spoke with the confidence of someone who knew exactly who she was and what she was worth. She talked about invisibility and shame, about learning to take up space, about finding someone who saw her when the world looked through her, and having the courage to believe she deserved that love. And when she finished, when the room erupted in applause and women lined up afterward to tell her how much her words meant to them, Mila looked out into the audience and found Dominic watching from the back row. He was smiling, pride written all over his face, and Mila knew with absolute certainty that this was where she was meant to be. Not hidden, not invisible, not shrinking to make others comfortable, but standing in the light, claiming her space, being exactly who she was meant to be. Chosen, loved, visible, forever. Years later, when people asked Mila Vale how she'd gone from housemaid to one of the city's most respected advocates for women's empowerment, she always gave the same answer. I stopped believing the world's verdict about who I was supposed to be. I found someone who saw my worth when I couldn't see it myself. And I had the courage to choose love over fear, visibility over safety, and my own truth over everyone else's narrative. And beside her, Dominic would add with a smile, she was never invisible. She was just waiting for someone brave enough to really look. Because in the end, that was the truth of Mila Ross. Now, Mila Vale. She hadn't been saved by a prince or rescued from poverty. She'd been seen by a man who understood that worth wasn't measured in appearance or status or what the world deemed acceptable. She'd been chosen openly and without apology by someone who loved her for exactly who she was. And in being chosen, she'd found the courage to choose herself, to stand, to speak, to take up space in a world that had always told her she didn't belong. That was her real transformation. Not from maid to wife, but from invisible to undeniable, from hidden to whole, from secret to certain. And she lived the rest of her life proving that women like her, women the world overlooked, were always worth choosing. They just needed someone brave enough to see them first,